Hello, everybody.
Ending the first week of April here. Busy first week for Therapy Flow. We announced some of our new private practice coaches, six-figure, seven-figure practice owners, which is kind of our segue into today's topic, which is sort of the love of money and why does it matter? Maybe not that, but seven-figure practices and maybe even six-figure practices. Why that number segment? And as we dig into it, before Attilio hops in, I'm going to say one last thing. Um, there, I think there's some clarity that people get to have when we talk about like money versus another form of measurable metric that I think is both really positive and really negative. So I think being able to like affirm that we have some like private practice coaches that are like seven-figure business owners, you're able to immediately identify, oh, they like probably did something right to get there. And that's really important. But then on the flip side, I think what doesn't show up there is one, not everybody needs or wants that size of a business. I think that's first and foremost. Or number two is not everyone can achieve that size of a business based off of the other restrictions that they have in their life or the other values that they have in their life. So I think although we talk about money and we talk about getting to a certain size, six figures or seven figures, it isn't from a place of you should necessarily want this too. I don't think either of us want to like define that for another practice owner or their own outcomes. However, it's a really good indication when you do reach those levels based off of the business metrics that therapy practices can have that you're doing something right either as a solo or as a group practice. So I think that's my 2 second spiel as we start this why seven-figure practice conversation.
Yeah, I'll riff on that just a little bit. Everyone has their own treasure, right? You determine what is most valuable for yourself in this world. And seven figures could be a massively profitable business. It could be seven figures and you're making $10,000, right? There's a lot that is packed in there. But I think what we want to draw the most attention to from this conversation, and the reason why we um, kind of like focus our heads around a seven figure, and we have a core piece of our curriculum is the seven figure flow, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why we kind of wrap ourselves around it is because at seven figures you finally start having enough numbers to actually have data that makes sense. You have finally enough dollar signs where if you make an improvement on something, you expect a change to actually represent dollar signs instead of maybe something works, maybe it doesn't work. You are now spending enough money and collecting enough money and working with enough people and doing enough conversations that you start being able to recognize that your business is a system, and your business is a system where you have inputs that create outputs. And so when we start looking at a system like that, you're looking at about a seven figure practice. You now realize, hey, these are the core things that really move the needle. These are the things that I can actually get out of my business. So many clinicians are talking about, like, I want freedom. I want to scale myself out. I want to start up a course. I want to do this. I want to diversify my revenue. If you ask us honestly, it starts by getting your practice to a point where it even makes sense to start looking at some of those other things.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't even make sense to start doing some of those other things, then you're just doing a million things. And I'll tell you that that's probably a big, huge indicator of massive failure rather than massive success.
Yeah. It's a really just weird equation where depending on how you get there and how you achieve it, to have that freedom that you want from the business, specifically that separation, that costs money. Because what separates you from the business is two things. You no longer relying on the physical session to session income from you being the hour to hour session person, right? So you need separation from there on an income level, and that can only come from a diversity of income coming from other sources that don't require an hour to hour work basis. But then you also need separation from the admin management of, who's booking the clients, who's doing the sales calls, who's managing the clinicians, who's making business decisions on a day-to-day basis. And if you ever want freedom, even just a little bit or a lot of it from those things, you have to hire the team, both quantity of therapists to work with you or for you, and the admin staff, and then eventually the practice manager, and maybe even the CEO, right? If you get to that size, where you can own the practice as an asset rather than work within your practice as one of the primary income drivers. So that's, from our perspective, typically starts to become really possible at that like 700,000 to $1 million mark and beyond. Anything before that, sometimes it's really hard to be able to frankly just afford the admin team or afford the number of bodies in your practice that can make it happen.
Yeah. You said something kind of interesting where it's like the to get out of the actual like work and become the owner. I feel like, and I feel like anyone who's at the 7-figure mark would also agree with this. Once you're at this point, this like, and you said 700 to a million, but I might give it like 700 to like 1.2 million, where
Yeah.
there's like a little bit of still like rat race material in there. But once you're at that range, you can kind of really move into this owner role. You now control an asset
Yeah.
rather than the business is, you're still working through the business. You're still having to put in a ton of energy and time and
Yeah.
work. And then that's when you get to make the decision. Hey, do I want to actually be the operator, or do I need to do something else? Do I want to expand my revenue differently? Do I want to? So guys, that's where 7 figures comes from. That's where 7 figures come from. 7 figures is it's a flag in the ground that symbolizes a level of freedom, a level of cash, a level of experience and expertise, and a little bit of mastery on your business in a way that it creates more opportunity for you.
Yeah. I'd say one of the thing, many of you have the incredible and noble goal and desire to drive a lot of impact in your community. Be able to serve low income, offer free sessions, do community resources, make an impact with the services that you provide. But you're also trying to, while making an impact, make a living at the same time. Some of you also have the incredible bad experience of having terrible bosses, terrible managements, terrible agency placement, bad supervisors, being underpaid, under-resourced. And obviously that comes on the back of some industry trends that need to change, but then also individual business owners that don't value their employees or their process. And we can also say, when you only are doing a couple 100,000 a year and you're barely able to pull a salary, it's a lot harder to be generous. It's a lot harder to dig into your profit margin and say, hey, instead of a 20% profit margin in my business, I'm going to come down to 15% or 10% because I can still make a living off of that 10%, but that means I can provide that distribution into free services or into higher average salaries or higher session splits for my therapist. Most of some of your like dreams and resources and goals come from operating a larger business because that size actually gives you the security, right? And the flexibility enough there to kind of feed more mouths with the mission values that I know many of you have. And that's in some ways some of like we go through those transitions. We've been through those transitions as like, great, our business grew a little bit more. Like, what are our initial needs? Great. What are our employee needs? What are our community needs, right? How can we give away more for free? How can we value our own employees? How can we, do profit margin on those? And each one of those decisions has become a lot easier, like as our business grows and as we have more impact that way. So that's where that 7-figure number comes from, is that's usually a fun but critical mass turning point, especially as a group practice owner, where you can make some of those value-driven choices now because you have the freedom and the dollars to do it.
Yeah, I might close it out with just one last thing, guys. It's a misnomer, maybe. It's a bad way to interpret data. I think we've all heard the saying, millionaires have 7 streams of income. And so where does this apply here? Millionaires have 7 streams of income. But what they don't tell you on that data point is how they got their first $1 million. And typically millionaires get focused on one big thing. They make their money and then they put their money in different places. And so to echo exactly what Josh was saying, you get a lot more options when you're a little bit bigger. And so can you focus? Can you come up with a system? Can you get just good enough where things are sustainable? I used to have a dentist back when I was up in Chicago. He owned a dental practice with 30 dentists. And what lit him on fire was providing dental services to homeless or underserved individuals who wouldn't otherwise be able to receive dental services. And so sure enough, with his huge clinic that he had, every Saturday he opened up and he was able to literally afford several dentists and himself to go in and totally help people free of charge. And so all of that's possible on the back of cash, on the back of the assets that you create while you're moving your way up, on the back of really a 7-figure practice. So
yeah. We hope this inspires you to keep those values you have for your community and for care and for your clinicians, but understand maybe the size of the practice you have to build if you want to make those values a reality.
Yeah. Much love, guys.
If you want help with that, let us know. We're here.
Yeah.
Till next time, everyone.